Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and as foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we have a few articles about some funny-looking water, more police brutality, again, and brutality in general with the citizens, Russia and China joining forces to combat larger entities, and the latest on the business of prisons, which we've reported on in the past, and Putin's meeting with the Pope, and of course, much, much more. But first, we start our article off today with the report on the water. Well, after months and months of drought and the recent rains in Texas, some Abilene residents are a little concerned about, well, not the lack of water, but the lack of clarity in the water. Residents in Abilene, Texas have been experiencing brown water when they turn on the tap.
City of Abilene water officials say that the discoloration is caused by the mineral manganese. They say that all the recent rainfall and all the water flowing into our supply lakes is causing the problem. The city also said that although the water may be unsightly, it is not unsafe to use.
Wow, I bet that's a sight. And the police are in the spotlight yet once again, as a newly released video shows officers violently manhandling a female that they had taken into custody. A surveillance camera inside, of course, the police department show a female deputy shoving and punching a detainee several times. The victim said she tried to resist, but the deputy locked her in a room where, of course, there were no cameras, and it was there, she said, she was brutally beaten.
Reporting on her injuries, the victim, Audra West, said, "I had bruises all over my body. My face was swollen. My eye was basically swollen shut. It was frightening. It was absolutely frightening," she said. Now, another inmate who witnessed the case said that there was no reason for any such violence. West said that she asked the deputy for a sanitary product and cursed the deputy when she refused.
Well, that female deputy, of course, claims that she was assaulted by West, but that was not upheld. The attorney said that he couldn't see anywhere that West had presented a physical threat while under arrest, and the victim's lawyer now promises a fight for justice.
In other news, a new blood test has been developed that can diagnose every virus or disease that they've ever had or currently do have within just one drop of blood. Now, Dr. David Angus says that there are over 200 viruses that humans are exposed to, and every time we're exposed to a virus, we make an immune response, which are antibodies in the blood.
All right. He continued, this test is able to look at all of those antibodies, of course, that you made in response to those viruses. And what the test screens for is the 206 known human viruses, as well as the 1,000 different strains of those viruses. Now, the test will show what you may have been exposed to, of course, in the past, and even what you have been exposed to right now. Currently, the test is not on the market, but will have an estimated cost of, get this, Jeff, only $25.
Wow.
That's right, $25. And it'll be able to test for most viruses and uses only, like you said before, just one little drop of blood.
Currently, the process for scanning viruses can only detect one pathogen at a time. The new process can test 100 samples and take only 2 to 3 days for results and should be available within the next year. In a study done in the Journal at Medical Science, a group at Harvard showed that on average, an individual has about 10 virus families that they've been infected with in their lifetime, some going much higher than that.
All right, and it's interesting, it's not just one virus, but a virus family.
That's right.
A virus and its strains. Well, research over the next few years will help determine how to use this information in the medical field going forward.
China and Russia are committed to promoting a multipolar world order through mutual cooperation. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said, "Together with Russia, we are seeking to connect with other nations to develop equal and stable cooperation in an effort to achieve a higher place in global affairs, in developing countries, and global markets. We've been closely interacting over international and regional problems, and we've been working together to promote the idea of multipolarity for years."
Right. In addition to promoting this multipolar world order, China's foreign minister also point to boosting the UN's role and authority in global affairs and implementing reforms in the world body. Both foreign ministers stressed the importance of increasing their joint efforts, again, we're speaking of China and Russia, to counter global and regional, what he put it as, challenges.
Well, from nations connecting through their treaties to citizens connecting with fists, YPN's Larry McGee has our story on the increasing aggression in our society, one factor that may be influencing it, and some of the consequences that follow as a result. Larry, how are we seeing this aggression increase?
The brawl of the week at a Wal-Mart in Indiana might just be a prime example, and that it involved two women humbugging ferociously might be an even greater indication. The altercation was caught by one of the store's patrons on video and shows the two women exchanging loud insults over several store aisles before one of the women leaps up from a store motor cart and the words turn into blows. As the women rumbled, cage style, knocking items off the shelves as they went, the fight eventually went to the floor, where one of the most disturbing scenes of the video appears when the adolescent son of one of the women joins the fight and begins striking and kicking the other woman. Onlookers instructed the child to stop, to which he replied, "He's not one," and they therefore could not tell him what to do. Ideas are now beginning to circulate as to what might be playing a key role in such violent behavior, as Fox Sports columnist Jason Whitlock indicates that the culprit might actually be music in the prison industrial complex, while most of those in their late 30s and above might remember hip-hop for its social consciousness, imaginative storytelling, and the laughable antics of groups like the Fat Boys. Mr. Whitlock says that it has now become the marketing arm for America's war on drugs and is the tool that has been used to define African American men as worthy of criminalization. According to Whitlock, hip-hop is the lobby of the prison industrial complex, and he asks, why is it that prison building is up and incarceration is up, and there is indifference to it globally? No one cares about the African American man in the United States, the columnist said. Why is that? To answer, Whitlock says, it's because the image of black men has been destroyed by hip-hop at home and globally. We've been defined as criminal and unworthy of respect. However controversial, it does shed an interesting light on the multi-billion-dollar business of private prisons, which has surfaced over the last couple of decades. Paul Reynolds, a former correctional officer at a private prison, now turned activist against for-profit prisons, sat down with reporters this week to describe how prisoners equal profit. Reynolds says, when you can have more bodies in a prison, obviously you're going to make more money off of them. From there, profits are further increased by cutting costs and basically treating those who are incarcerated like chattel. To reporters' questions as to why any institution then would want to rehabilitate inmates if bigger inmate populations translate into bigger money, the former correctional officer says they wouldn't, and that is exactly why the rehabilitation programs were taken out of the prison where he once worked. Reynolds says there is no rehabilitation in prison, and to reporters' questions concerning why the government then puts trust into private prison operators if such allegations are true, the former correctional officer says he is sure they are getting something back. That something comes with a heavy cost, which is sometimes tragically fatal, as is demonstrated by an alarming tale of a lengthy stint of incarceration without even a formal charge, which took place in the Empire State. 22-year-old Khalif Broder was confined at Rikers Isle, where reports say he experienced beatings, mental abuse, and long periods of segregation. Broder was accused at 16 of theft by robbery, but denied the allegations and was never given a trial. 3 years later, he was released, where at his parents' home, the young man, after 2 failed attempts, finally succeeded had taken his life. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, that's definitely evident that we need a peaceful solution in our society right now.
Need a change.
That's right. Well, President Vladimir Putin kept Pope Francis waiting yet again. President Putin has had 2 meetings with the Pope. In the first one, he was 50 minutes late. Well, however, this time he kept the Pope waiting even longer at 70 minutes. When he finally arrived, the two sat down for an extremely cold meeting. Needless to say, Pope Francis did not take Putin's tardiness very well.
Now, Putin's trip to Italy was rather significant because out of all the EU nations, Italy has been a bit more tolerant when it comes to economic sanctions with Russia. During the Cold War, about 1/3 of Italians voted for the Communist Party. They never actually won the elections, but it showed there was a relationship going on between the two countries.
Pope Francis, who has been known throughout time to be a diplomat to all world leaders, talked about peace in Ukraine and encouraged President Putin to honor the Minsk Accords. Well, Putin's response was only a small nod. Hardly a confirmation, of course, of any agreement with that, small nod. Well, the Pope then presented Putin with a medal, which he said represented peace. And he explained he was giving it to him as a reminder to always maintain the peaceful agreement.
Kind of like a subtle reminder.
Yeah, just to kind of put that bug in his ear, so to speak.
Well, despite the coldness displayed at the meeting, all world leaders eventually have to come through and pay their respects to the Pope, who's head of the Roman Catholic Church, which has 1.2 billion followers. But as we reported, Katan, that number is falling and starting to fall fast.
That's right.
Now, the Pope is a diplomat and a politician and may be unknown to some, but the Catholic Church has been brokering deals between countries for thousands of years. A recent example of this is the Pope's involvement in relations between the U.S. and Cuba, of which that President Obama actually thanked the Pope for his help in that situation.
It wasn't that long ago. According to Forbes magazine, the Red Cross is the 5th largest charity in the United States. Now, despite this fact, they have failed to deliver on promises made to Haiti in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake in 2010. Raising $500 million for Haitians and boasting they have provided housing for 130,000 people. A recent joint investigation by news media's ProPublica and NPR revealed only, now get this, Jeff, 6 permanent homes have been built over the last 5 years. Just 6 houses, just a little over 1 house a year for 130,000 people. That's kind of setting the bar pretty low.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, recently on RT, Larry King interviewed Kevin Cruz, a professor of history at Princeton University and author of One Nation, Under God, How Corporate America Invented Christian America.
Well, in his book, Kevin examines how in the 1930s corporate America pushed back against the New Deal, a government program which heavily regulated businesses' activities. The New Deal also empowered labor unions who were on strike all around them at the time. While Americans blamed the Great Depression on big business, the corporate leaders were looking for ways to win their trust.
Now, they started with a massive campaign of public relations. Professor Cruz stated, so corporate leaders push back with a massive campaign of public relations. The National Association of Manufacturers increases its PR funds by 22 times, but spending millions of dollars to sway the public has no effect. So they had to take a different route.
Now, Professor Cruz gave an example of how the public viewed this approach, saying, one of these groups is called the American Liberty League. It's heavily funded by DuPont, General Motors, and other corporations. The problem is that their argument sounded like they're coming from DuPont and General Motors and other corporations. Jim Farley, the head of the Democratic Party, said they ought to call the American Liberty League the American Cellophane League because, number one, it's a DuPont company, and of course, number two, you can see right through it.
Well, Cruz explained how they realized that they needed to make a different case for free enterprise. Now, privately and then in public speeches, the corporate leaders started building up Christian ministers as the most trusted people in America. He goes on to say, and so if we can get ministers to make this case for us, it will resonate with the public, and that's exactly what they do. So paying priests to preach about the evil of the New Deal, corporate America looks like the savior to the newly found faith of Christian America.
Interesting. Usually a city takes pride when it is ranked in the top 10 for something. But St. Louis is not so glad to be called number 1 when it comes to sexually transmitted diseases. Yeah, that's a big ouch. But that's exactly what it ranks. Although few have any desire to really talk about STDs, doctors say it's time to stop pretending there's no problem in St. Louis. Time for the talking to begin and time for testing as well.
If the first time you're reading about infectious diseases is in the doctor's office, you're probably getting the message too late. Dr. Hillary Reno, MD and PhD, says prevention messages are super important, and the more times people hear it, the more they are likely to take it to heart. The more they hear it, the more they're likely to take it to heart, she says. Now, currently, St. Louis leads the country with almost 1,300 cases of chlamydia infections per 100,000 people. The city ranks second in gonorrhea with 551 per 100,000 and is ninth in syphilis with 19 per 100,000.
Yeah, she definitely hit the nail on the head with that prevention and hearing that message, because education is definitely the key to something like that. Well, our final report today is on what scientists are calling one of the most addicting drugs ever. So addicting that 30,000 people every second are doing it. Now, take a look at this video from fightthenewdrug.org.
I want to talk to you about this, our brain. It's something that we all have, performing at different capacities, I'm sure, but still, we all have one, and it was given to us for free just for being born, and it's the powerhouse of our bodies. Without it, of course, we just drop dead, because you can't function without it. So it's the most valuable thing that each of us possess. So it's pretty important that we protect it, right? And luckily, we have these things called skulls to help us out. Sometimes we challenge those skulls and do things that kind of hurt our brains, like this and this. I don't even know what he's thinking. And sometimes we just make stupid decisions with those brains, and you know, this guy, luckily this guy's wearing a helmet, so. But what are some other things that might hurt our brains? Obviously we've got alcohol, we've got drugs, and we've got, you know, big metal balls with spikes on the end of them. But I want to talk about a new drug. The thing is, pornography is not all that new. It's been around since the beginning. So why are we calling it a new drug? Well, that's because scientists are just now, over the last decade, beginning to understand what pornography really does, how it affects our brains, and psychologists are understanding how it affects our behaviors, and sociologists, our society. And so we're just beginning to understand that it can be just as addictive as drugs, as hard drugs. And we'll explain how, because I know that there's some skeptical eyes out there kind of thinking, wait a second, drugs? Really? I don't sniff it, I don't inhale it, I don't inject it. How is pornography like a drug? But first, you're probably wondering, dude, we're teenagers, why are you talking to us? Why are you talking to us about pornography? It's an uncomfortable topic, right? In fact, I bet you anything that as you guys came into this, as you kind of found out what this was going to be all about, you thought to yourself, oh boy, here we go. Shoot, you know, how do I get out of this? I mean, not a lot of people like to talk about it, but it's becoming more and more of an issue, and we got to deal with it. And here's why we're talking to you guys. The largest group of internet porn users is youth, ages 12 to 17, you guys. 90% of the people watching this video right now fit into that group. Do you know what the average age of exposure is for pornography? 11 years old. 11! And 9 out of 10 youth ages 8 to 16 have seen it. So we know what it is. We know what it is. We're not here to define it. Get this. Every second, now, 30,000 people are viewing online pornography. And what was the largest group of internet porn users? 12 to 17, so you see how a lot of those are there. And girls, watching this right now, listen up. A lot of you tune out for topics like this. You kind of think, okay, it's a guy's issue, it's not my issue. Recent statistics show that 30% of addicts are women. That number has skyrocketed over the last decade, and it's growing. So current research is showing that pornography is a drug, and that it can lead to addiction. But some of you are looking out there going like, well, how? It doesn't make any sense. How? Again, I don't sniff it, I don't smoke it. Well, how? Let me show you. Pornography goes in through the eyes, in through the iris, and triggers a release of chemicals in your brain. Chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, oxytocin. Now this is a science class, but you may have heard of some of those. Now these are natural chemicals that your body produces. These chemicals are needed. When you do drugs, hard drugs, or look at pornographic material, your brain is overloaded with these chemicals. After you keep looking at porn, your brain gets used to those high amounts and builds up a tolerance. Those same images that once gave you a rush don't have the same effect anymore. In order to get that same rush, it not only takes more of it, but it also takes a more hardcore version of it. Your brain becomes dependent on that rush of chemicals and literally rewires itself to think that that's normal, and so you cannot function without it. That is addiction. The same process happens with cocaine and heroin. They can't stop.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. Again, like the doctor said, Dr. Reno, people continually hearing a message will help with prevention and keep people from making these poor choices.
Well, despite all the negative pulls and influences in our societies today, there is a program that can show anyone, young or old, how to separate themselves from this destructive behavior and have a life filled with peace and joy. The Peaceful Solution, authored by Yishro Hawkins, was designed to reestablish the morals in our society that are needed in order for mankind to have a healthy, fulfilling life. Now check out the Peaceful Solution program for yourself by visiting their website at www.peacefulsolution.org. And while you're at it, contact the House of Yahweh and request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter.
Here's how you can do that. You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yishrohawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside of the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another exciting message from Yishro Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.